The FG-42, German, Fallschirmjägergewehr 42, paratrooper rifle 42, is a selective fire automatic rifle produced in Nazi Germany during World War II. The weapon was developed specifically for the use of the Fallschirmjäger airborne infantry in 1942 and was used in very limited numbers until the end of the war. It combined the characteristics and firepower of a light machine gun in a lightweight form no larger than the standard-issue Kar 98K bolt-action rifle. Considered one of the most advanced weapon designs of World War II, the FG-42 influenced post-war small arms development, and most of its design was copied by the U.S. Army when they developed the M60 machine gun. History at the time of the Battle of Crete, Operation Mercury, German Fallschirmjäger, parachute infantry, were equipped with the same assortment of small arms as the Heer, carrying only pistols and hand grenades on them during parachute jumps, with submachine guns, rifles, and crew-served weapons stored separately in containers that were dropped from the wing of the exit craft. The German parachute harness, with a single strap attached to the body making the paratrooper land on his hands and knees in a forward roll, did not allow for heavier equipment such as rifles and machine guns to be safely carried during jumps. At Crete, long-range rifle and machine gun fire from dug-in Commonwealth defenders inflicted heavy casualties on the outgunned German paratroopers in the early stages of battle as they attempted to retrieve their support weapons from containers scattered all over the battlefield. These combat experiences demonstrated the need for a rifle that could be carried on the person of the paratrooper. Development. In 1941, the German Air Force, Luftwaffe, requested a selective fire handheld weapon for the paratroopers. Senior Staff Air Secretary Ossenbeck at the GL/C Erprobungsstelle 6, GL/CE6, the Luftwaffe Weapons Development Branch at Tarnwitz near Lübeck, was approached informally to develop this special new weapon. The Reich Air Ministry, Reichsluftfahrtministerium or RLM, sought to develop a universal shoulder-fired automatic rifle that could replace the bolt-action rifle, submachine gun, and light machine gun in the air assault role. The proposed weapon would also simplify logistics and provide greater firepower to the individual paratrooper. The RLM attempted to initiate a formal weapons development program through the Heereswaffenamt, the WA, or Army Ordnance Department, responsible for German small arms development, but conflicting priorities and friction with the Army. The WA dismissed the undertaking as unrealistic and offered their G41W semi-automatic rifle instead, led to an independent development by the Luftwaffe. Plans were laid out to form a central authority for the new program at the Luftwaffe's Erprobungsstelle coastal testing station at Tarnwitz. The engineers on staff had acquired considerable expertise developing lightweight automatic weapons, having successfully converted the MG-15 aircraft machine gun to a ground configuration. However, due to the high casualties sustained by the paratroopers during Operation Mercury, Hitler changed his mind about the usefulness of airborne assaults and the plans were terminated. Nevertheless, Luftwaffe Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring privately ordered the continuation of the project. The RLM went directly to German industry with its plans. The so-called LC6 specification issued December 14, 1941 mentioned amongst others that the weapon should not exceed 1000 mm, 39.4 in length, should not be significantly heavier than the Kar 98K rifle, should be able to fire single shots from a closed bolt, provide fully automatic fire from an open bolt, feed from detachable 10 or 20 round magazines and be able to fire rifle grenades. Despite the introduction of the intermediate 7.9 mm Kurs cartridge promoted by the Heer, developed for the promising MP-43 assault rifle, the Luftwaffe favored the long-range potential of the standard 7.92 x 57 mm Mauser rifle round, and this caliber was one of the main design prerequisites. Prototypes. 6 manufacturers were solicited for prototype designs: Gustloff-Werke, Mauser, Johannes Grossfuss Metal und Lackierwarenfabrik, C.G. Haenel, Rheinmetall Borsig, and Heinrich Krieghoff Waffenfabrik. Several contracts were awarded, but only a few prototypes are known to have been submitted. Mauser offered a version of the MG81, rejected due to excessive weight and its belt-fed operation, while Krieghoff presented a rising block prototype, which too was quickly dropped. A design credited to Rheinmetall Borsig's Louis Stange of Sommerda proved satisfactory and underwent military trials conducted by the GL/CE6 test station at Tarnwitz in mid-1942. This early prototype, known under the factory designation Gerät 450, Device 450, or Ausführung A, Type A, was intended to be a pure sheet metal design, using pressed steel in the construction of the receiver, buttstock, and corrugated handguard. The proposed system of operation was modeled on that used in World War I Lewis light machine gun, with a gas-operated turning bolt action geared to a spiral, clock-type, recoil spring. The Type A was never produced beyond model form, but the basic design layout was retained for further development. With the basic characteristics of the LC6 accepted, a series of modifications followed. The revised Ausführung B replaced the sheet metal handguard with a resin-impregnated fiber type that provided protection against heat and a better grip when wet. These tests exposed several shortcomings, addressed by Stange in April 1942 with the LC6/2 prototype. The prototype was then submitted to a series of endurance tests led by the WA and further modified to increase functional reliability and durability, resulting in the final LC6/3 prototype variant that was ultimately accepted into production as the FG42. 50 rifles were fabricated by Rheinmetall Borsig for evaluation purposes by the end of 1942. A pre-series batch of 50 rifles was produced in early 1943 and 6 examples were sent to GL/CE6 for additional testing. Almost identical to the LC6/3, these guns differ from later models by using a smooth sheet metal buttstock and an experimental muzzle brake. The weapons experienced serious malfunctions. One rifle suffered a catastrophic failure after firing only 2,100 rounds, a soldier was injured when attempting to fire a rifle grenade and the pressed metal buttstock would deform after launching a small number of rifle grenades. Production. Several other improvements were made before being authorized for large-scale production. The original Rheinmetall design used chrome-nickel steel heavily in many essential components, a strategic alloy in short supply. When the Luftwaffe was finally given permission to produce 3,000 rifles for combat trials, the material specifications were changed to accommodate the use of manganese steel as a substitute. The Heinrich Krieghoff Company of Seoul, authors of the previous unsuccessful LC6 tender, was contracted to manufacture the FG42 in limited quantity as Rheinmetall did not have the capacity to bring the FG42 into serial production. The weapon system underwent continuous development. Its expedited development, remedial changes to the original design and ever-changing Luftwaffe requirements resulted in a myriad of variants. Post-war literature typically identifies 3 versions, however the Germans did not give them separate designations. The Model I, Model II and Model 3 were never officially referenced and period documents simply refer the weapon as the FG42, and the reference was always made to the latest production model. First operational use. The weapon saw first operational use during the Gran Sasso raid, Unternehmen in September 1943 when German paratroopers and Waffen-SS commandos rescued Italian dictator Benito Mussolini from his captors' 200 well-equipped Carabinieri guards. However, during the whole airborne operation, which was personally ordered by Hitler, not a single shot was fired. Deployment. After approximately 2,000 FG-42s had been produced by Krieghoff, supplies of the manganese steel from which the receivers were forged were diverted to other needs. This meant a redesign was required to use stamped sheet metal in its place. Field reports were also requesting minor improvements, such as relocating the bipod from the front of the handguard to the muzzle to reduce shot dispersion, changing the pistol grip angle to near vertical, enlarging the handguard and changing the stock from stamped steel to wood to minimize overheating. These changes, particularly the pistol grip change and the bipod relocation, are clearly visible on late model FG-42s. Both models also had a simple flip-out spike bayonet under the barrel hidden by the bipod. In the later version the bayonet was shortened from around 10 inches, 250 mm, to around 6 inches, 150 mm. Design details. General configuration/layout. The FG-42 was a select-fire air-cooled weapon and one of the first to incorporate the straight-line recoil configuration. This layout, combined with the side magazine, placed both the center of gravity and the position of the shoulder stock nearly in line with the longitudinal axis of the bore, a feature increasing controllability during burst or automatic fire. The operating system was derived from that used in the successful Lewis light machine gun with a gas piston-actuated turning bolt locking mechanism. This system used pressurized exhaust gases from the bore and channeled them through a port drilled in the barrel into a gas cylinder located under the barrel. The rapid buildup of propellant gases imparted rearward pressure on a long-stroke piston, driving it backwards, while an extension of the bolt carrier interacted with a helical camming slot machined into the bolt carrier, converting this linear movement into an angular velocity and forcing the bolt into a rotary motion, clearing the locking juts and unlocking it near the end of the bolt carrier's travel. The weapon was locked into battery by two lugs on the bolt head which recessed into appropriate cavities machined into the receiver walls. Owing to its main intended use by paratroopers, the rear sight, which necessarily was rather high due to the straight stock design, was a flip-up construction. Receiver specifics and magazine feeding. The receiver was a sophisticated, machined alloy forging with the magazine housing placed on the left-hand side and the ejection port on the right. The seemingly awkward placement of the magazine housing, horizontally to the side rather than directly beneath the receiver, allowed the bolt mechanism to extend into the buttstock assembly, effectively reducing the overall length of the weapon as the magazine well did not interfere with the location of the pistol grip. The pistol grip was integrated into the trigger group assembly, a separate housing containing the trigger mechanism and fire control components, and was formed from pressed sheet metal during fabrication from two separate halves and then welded together. The rifle fed from either a 10 or 20 round detachable box magazine. Firing. The FG-42 fired in semi-automatic mode from a closed bolt, accomplished by delaying the release of the firing pin, mounted on the bolt carrier and released by the front sear notch, until after the trigger had been pressed. The short lock time, and little movement in the action during firing translated into greater single-shot accuracy. When operating in the automatic mode, the sear mechanism was designed to fire from an open bolt by simultaneously releasing both the bolt and bolt carrier. This had the advantage of preventing a phenomenon known as cook-off, where the heat of repeated rounds being fired caused a chambered round to overheat and prematurely ignite the powder or primer. With automatic fire selected, the bolt would remain open between bursts to provide maximum cooling. The rotating fire selector switch was situated in the trigger group, above the pistol grip on the right side. The charge lever also served as the safety, disabling the sear mechanism when engaged. Testing. The FG-42 was intended to fill a key niche in Nazi Germany's arsenal and was produced only in small numbers. It was somewhat well received by paratroopers when tested, but it did have its drawbacks. The FG-42 had a 20-round, or sometimes 10-round, magazine that was mounted on the left side of the rifle. Though a side-mounted magazine was common in submachine guns of the time, the larger magazine with heavier ammunition of a full-powered rifle tended to unbalance the weapon. In addition, muzzle rise with automatic fire was substantial and controllable bursts were difficult. This made full automatic fire only marginally useful. The FG-42 used a fairly sophisticated muzzle device that did help with recoil and muzzle flash, but made blast and noise much greater than on other similar weapons. The US M14 rifle had similar problems, and attempts were made to upgrade that rifle the same way with an inline stock and muzzle device. Influences/derivatives. Some features, such as the details of the gas-operated bolt selection process, were studied by U.S. Army engineers after the war. These, along with some aspects of the MG42, are commonly reported to have been incorporated in the similarly trebled M60 machine gun. The American M41 Johnson LMG has many parallels with the contemporary FG-42. Both had inline stocks, fed from the left side, and both fired from the open bolt in automatic mode and closed bolt in semi-automatic mode. Despite these similarities, there is no evidence that either weapon had any effect on the design of the other. As they were both seeking to solve similar problems, it is reasonable to expect that each weapon's respective engineers approached these problems similarly but independently, unaware of the developments of their counterparts. Last known derivatives of the FG-42 were the Sturmgewehr 52 and M60 machine gun. Users: Argentina, trial purposes only. Finland, saw some small action in Tailaihantala in 1944. Used by German stocks. Germany, used during World War II. North Vietnam.
Please subscribe and thanks for watching.